Hello, everyone. We got another emergency trade, this time De'Aaron Fox, the one we were all expecting. And he heads to this destination we all saw coming. And three-team trade. These three teams, the Kings, Spurs, Bulls, they've all done another trade earlier in July. They made another trade now. So we're going to pull up the details. We've got them all here by Shams. De'Aaron Fox heading to the Spurs alongside Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings, they come out of this with Zach LaVine, which was something that I thought might be a possibility. I talked about it on my stream, actually, I think yesterday, about the possibility, why don't the Spurs, the Kings, if they send out De'Aaron Fox, get some draft picks back, and maybe with the salaries of De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles, bring back a combination of like Zach LaVine and maybe another guy like Cam Johnson or John Collins, some of the guys they've been linked to. And they get Zach LaVine, so they get him 3 firsts, which we'll get into the quality of those, what those actually entail. And then the Bulls, they get several role players, Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter. They get their own first-round pick back that they originally sent to the Spurs for DeMar DeRozan. And I suppose we can just start debating, should we start with the Spurs or Kings? Let's get into the Spurs first. So, Spurs, I really like this for the Spurs, even though I was saying that I think they should have been holding off from doing anything, especially after Luka just got traded to the Lakers. I kind of felt like, well, if he just got traded, now his whole contract situation is in flux. Okay, he's probably going to extend with the Lakers. That's probably the expectation. But if maybe he's in play in 2026, why don't you hold off? But now I really like the return for the Spurs, considering what they ended up giving up. So here's what their situation was before. Just a ton of flexibility. They had $21 million in space below the tax. And the whole debate was, what are they going to give up? Are they going to have to give up Devin Vassell or Stephon Castle, a combination of them, for salary matching? Will they have to send out Keldon Johnson or Chris Paul? Obviously, Harrison Barnes can't head back to the Kings. None of those guys are heading out. And here is their situation. So they're sending out basically one expiring salary, and then Zach Collins, who's owed like $17 million for next year, and the 3 first-round picks. So the mechanics, all they're really doing is, so they did the 3-for-1. They had to send out all of Zach Collins, Trey Jones, and CD Sissoko to match for De'Aaron Fox's $34.8 million. So all 3 of those guys get to $27.1 million, which is just enough to get to matching to Fox, and then they absorbed Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings sent them out. I'll get into why I think they included him, but the Spurs just take him in, minimum salary. So they're about $12 million below the tax, still have some flexibility to make another move this season if they wanted to, and still have a little bit of the room mid-level exception. So they could still make another move. I think the big question now is what's going to happen to Chris Paul. They're pretty loaded at guard right now, and I would imagine that his situation might be in play. Maybe he wants to stick around, but maybe he gets traded. Shouldn't be hard for him to get moved. And worst case, if he ends up getting bought out, which I highly doubt. I doubt the Spurs would buy him out at this point, but if let's say he gets traded to like a bad team to facilitate a trade, if he gets waived, bought out, he can sign with any team. His salary's low enough that he can sign with any of the apron teams if that worked out. But definitely keeping an eye on the Chris Paul situation now. But maybe they'll hold on to him. Maybe even while I'm doing this stream, we might even find out what his future is. Now, why I really like this trade for the Spurs is because the picks they gave out. I don't think they really gave out any quality picks at all. So they sent out the Bulls' own first back to the Bulls, which the Bulls were going to probably keep anyways. It's top 10 protected over this year and next year in 2027. And Now that they traded Zach LaVine, maybe they trade Vucevic as well. Even though they've been playing pretty high above their heads up until like the last 10 games, they were probably going to keep their pick anyways, and maybe over the next few years. They sent out a Hornets first, which is for 2025. The Spurs got that from, well, I mean, I don't remember how they got that, to be honest. I think from the Hawks trade. Yeah, they got it from the DeJounte Murray trade, but I don't know, maybe I'm confusing it. But either way, the that first is not going to become a first. It's going to become 2 seconds. So that's a fake first. That 27 Spurs first, like I said earlier this week, I think I either said on Twitter, any Spurs first going out, it's probably not going to be that valuable. And if I'm the Kings, if I'm going to want a Spurs first back, I'm going to want it back as late as possible. They're getting a Spurs first 2 years from now, probably when they're finally about to really maybe not contend, but start to make a deep run in the playoffs, maybe win a playoff round or two. So the most valuable pick that they got is that 2031 Wolves first. Not necessarily because the Wolves, I think they're going to be horrible at that by then. Who knows what's going to happen? You can't tell 6 years from now, but just getting a pick that far out is pretty valuable. So it seems like I think the Kings only got like one good first, especially because they only got 2 firsts in reality. And then they got 3 seconds. And the thing about this, why I really like it, the Spurs basically kept all their high quality picks that they have. They've got their own, which we'll see now that might be a little better than anticipated, even though it was going to be like higher in the lottery. Now that they got Fox, I would assume they probably make the play-in, and maybe they're going to even get a playoff seed. But they've got the Hawks 25 first round pick from the DeJounte Murray trade, and they just lost Jalen Johnson for the season, and they've been on a slide. So that's looking very, very valuable. They've also got swapping rights with the Hawks next year, and then they've got another first with the Hawks. So it'll be very interesting to see what else the Spurs can do, because they can probably do something nice just with those Hawks picks alone. Might be best to capitalize on them this summer, at least some of them. They still have their own first in 25, 29, 2031. And they have the Kings swap from the DeMar DeRozan trade from earlier in the summer. I'm surprised the Kings didn't get that back. That was something I was kind of expecting to happen if they ended up trading Fox to the Spurs. So the Spurs still have a lot of ammo to do something else in the future, which was my big concern. Not only do they keep all these high quality picks, they keep all their young players that they've been developing. This is my wife Dee. She's stopping in just to grab something. And now, so then that gets to the Kings side of things, because I do not like this deal for the Kings. It seems like I understand they kind of took what they could, but man, this was, it seems more for show than actual value they're getting. So the Kings, and then the other aspect I'll get into is the actual trade mechanics, which also doesn't look too great. We'll see what ends up happening. We still need to get some confirmation, especially on the Zach LaVine aspect, but they're already looking pretty inflexible at the beginning of the trade, about $30.2 million below the tax. So basically any trade is going to be dollar for dollar. Now, to do this trade, Zach LaVine, keep in mind, he's making more money than Fox. So that's why you send out Herter as well. So this is his salary if you include his trade bonus. So I'm just putting that in for now. I am keeping an eye on the possibility it might get waived. Maybe he takes a less than the full amount. If that does happen, then let's just say he waives it. He's only at $43 million, in which case they have a little more tax flexibility, about $10 million below the tax, so they could do a little something else. They have that open roster spot still. But that would make the trade a little more interesting, just in the sense that then they create a nice trade exception, because then the trade is Fox and Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. I forgot to take him out. Yeah, about $12 million below the tax. So then the trade would be if you're doing Fox and McLaughlin for LaVine, then that means you're trading Herter by himself. In which case, they would generate a nice $16 million trade exception. They have all these other trade exceptions, but given their proximity to the tax, haven't been able to use them. So that's the breakdown for the Kings. As for next year, looking ahead, doesn't really change too much about their outlook. They're going to be still not having a lot of flexibility, about 13 million below the tax. This is if LaVine doesn't have the trade bonus. I didn't put it in on this cap sheet. Wow, I didn't even take out Herter. No, so about 32 million below the tax. So good amount of flexibility. Actually, I'll take that back. So then they could probably use those trade exceptions, use the mid-level exception, or make some more trades to increase their payroll. So on one hand, you get LaVine, who now that max contract is aged well enough where it's kind of, in a sense, cost controlled, and he is going to have a player option after this season. So he will become extension eligible this summer. Maybe the Kings can get him to do a deal where he declines the player option, which would be close to 50 million. Get him something less, maybe but then you got to give him a longer deal. So that's the trade-off. So you get a little more flexibility in 26, 27. So we'll see how that ends up happening. But I get the Kings, like, this is the kind of trade I expected them to do, where they get someone in to keep them, try to be as competitive as possible. As good as Zach LaVine is, this season, the Kings, I think, got worse. Playmaking that needs to be taken care of now. They're going to have to figure that out. And I just feel like maybe in a year and a half, we could get to a point where maybe they're going to have to seriously consider doing a big rebuild, maybe having to trade Sabonis in that case, which they should probably get a pretty good return, better than Fox. I do want to go back to the Spurs. I forgot to talk about their long-term supposed next year cap sheet, because the expectation was that they were probably going to trade some of these guys like Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, get off a little bit more long-term money, because the only long-term money they got off was Zach Collins' $17 million salary. And because of that, now they have Fox in. They have all these guys under contract. They were going to have about $20 million in cap space before doing the Fox trade. Now they don't have cap space. And the reason I bring that up is because there is this element that maybe the Spurs would acquire De'Aaron Fox and then do a renegotiation and extension. So the idea would be they use about 10 million of their cap space to get De'Aaron Fox to the max, and then they could just extend them off of that. I did bring up that possibility in the last stream, but I didn't think that the Spurs would probably do it anyways, even if they have cap space, just because they're better off just having more flexibility to upgrade the roster. Now they're about 35 million below the projected tax, and they're probably going to be a little closer to the tax, just because I haven't updated these draft pick estimates, where I've got the Hawks at 16. That should be much higher now. But either way, they're still going to have a good amount of flexibility below the tax, which I assume they're not going to want to exceed next year, to further improve the roster with all the additional draft equity that they still have, that they got to keep after this trade. So I don't know. I think it's like an A+ trade for the Spurs. They really didn't give up anything of. I think the most valuable thing they gave up was that Wolves first. So then we can go to Chicago. And if you feel like they got nothing for LaVine, I'm not surprised that this is the return they got. They just got their own first back, which they probably were going to keep anyways, regardless of what ends up happening. Since they'll probably be bottoming out. So they need to create 2 roster spots before doing this trade. Not on Twitter right now. Maybe those decisions have been made, but maybe they can easily trade a guy like Torrey Craig on a minimum deal. Chris Duarte's on a minimum, on an expiring deal, THT. So they'll probably make those decisions pretty quick. So they don't really get any savings this year, and the savings comes mostly in the following season. But they get a good amount of cap flexibility. So here, okay, so let me show you what they were before. Here was a roster before, and they were very close to the tax. Still are. And they have this $17 million trade exception that they generated from the DeMar DeRozan trade, which they're not going to be able to use right now. However, they can structure things where they can generate a huge $26.3 million trade exception for Zach LaVine. That would include if they have Zach Collins go, one of Zach Collins or Kevin Huerter. So you put Kevin Huerter in the DeMar DeRozan trade exception, and then you take Trey Jones into the mid-level exception, which they haven't touched yet. Oh, you know what? They have touched it. I goosed that. You know what? Ignore that. So they're probably going to still generate a pretty big trade exception. It's going to be a little less than this now. I got to fix what I posted on Twitter. But either way, they're going to have... So then, they'll have still a pretty big trade exception for next year. And with the savings now, they're about $56 million below the tax. So they have room to beef up the roster in trades. I didn't put it in yet. Yeah, so here's the roster so far heading into next season. They can still run up their payroll a good amount, and they still have the flexibility to re-sign Josh Giddey, who's their only significant free agent. So that's everything I got on this trade. See if anything happened while I started this. Jimmy Butler has communicated to the Warriors that he's unwilling to sign an extension, and therefore trade talks to the Warriors have ended for now. Okay. I thought it was... So now the Warriors are not getting LaVine, and supposedly they were already kind of out on Butler. We'll see what ends up happening. I'm not ruling out... Just in the back of my head, this is just me. I'm not ruling out a LeBron trade. Just like the 1% chance. I understand that he's got the no trade clause. He said he's going to stick around. But after seeing Luka get traded, I'm not ruling out anything anymore. Maybe that's what the Warriors are focusing on. We'll see what's going to happen. So I think that's about all I got. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Please check out Third Apron. I've done a lot of stuff to cover the trade deadline up until that point. I'm going to have something up tomorrow on the Lakers' future, specifically how it factors in LeBron, since he's most likely going to stick around, and how they can factor him in. Since I think now, last offseason, we had the whole summer of, is he going to take a pay cut? And he gave them time when he declined his player option to see if they can bring anyone, and they didn't end up doing anything with it. I think we're going to probably have that type of situation happen again. And then, just follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky. I'm going to have a lot of good trade reactions as the moves come in. Talk to you guys.